So just want to welcome everyone. This is Arlene Welty. I'm a principal here at DataQuest. I want to thank you for joining our webinar today. We're going to be talking about Orchid EFT. So I just want to welcome everyone and remind you that I'm sure you'll have questions during this demo, which we're very excited about as we go through the functionality. So what we'll want to do is I'm going to ask you to, as you have questions, just enter those through the chat function, and I'll be keeping an eye on those so Debbie can stay focused. Debbie will answer them for you at the end of the demonstration. So if you want to practice sending me a question now through the chat, you can do that, and I'll reply to confirm. But let me introduce Debbie Mazzullo now, and she's going to be leading our demonstration on Orchid EFT today. So Debbie Mazzullo spent 10 years practicing as a CPA in a Washington, D.C. based public accounting firm. And when she was there, she fell in love with business systems consulting, and she has focused on that for the past 30 years. Debbie is also a principal at DataQuest Solutions, and she is an expert on Orchid EFT.
Well, hi, everyone. Welcome, and thank you so much for joining. I want to let you know I pre-recorded this to be sure that my timing was right, because we have these lunch and learns are short 30 minutes to get some good information to you. And I also wanted to avoid you painfully watching me try to type and talk at the same time during the demo, which I'm not very good at. So as Arlene said, please ask questions, though, type them into the chat and we'll address them at the end. So let's get to it. I'm going to start the recorded video. Today, I'm going to try to answer 3 questions I frequently get from businesses about bill payment. So I frequently get people saying, can I pay my bills for my business electronically like I pay my personal bills? It's so easy to pay them online. Another question I get is, how can I protect my business against check fraud? What are the best practices in that regard? And number 3, is there a less expensive way to pay vendors than printing and mailing checks? And the answer to all 3 of these is that there absolutely is a better way. Today we're going to learn how to do that, how to streamline your bill paying process in your organization with a product called Orchid EFT. So the EFT stands for Electronic Funds Transfer. What I'm going to try to cover is, what is Orchid EFT reporting? Who is Orchid Systems? At a high level, how does the Orchid EFT work? And what is the process for implementing Orchid EFT? Then I'd like to go into the product and do some demonstration of exactly how you use it. Finally, I'd like to close with a little discussion of what AP automation is and how it's different. And then if you guys have any questions and answers, as Arlene said, please put them in the chat. If you're listening to this video after the fact, please email us at info@dquest.com or contact us on our webpage. So what is Orchid EFT? Many people pay their personal bills through online banking, which is very easy. And in many cases, you can do that with your business payments as well. You can pay them online, but you still need to record that transaction in your accounting system. So the benefit of Orchid EFT processing is that you actually create the payment in your accounting system from within Sage 300, and then you submit that file to your bank via the EFT functionality of your banking software. So there's no duplicate entry. This product is a third-party product for Sage 300. It was developed by Orchid Systems. The benefits of using the product are that you can go paperless with payments, or at least many of your payments. It's much less costly because you save on check stock, envelopes, stamps, and most importantly, the time to go through that entire process. It keeps your vendors happy because they receive the money quicker and it's much more efficient. Orchid EFT supports formats for hundreds of banks around the world, and if necessary, we can modify the format to support any bank requirements if necessary. Orchid Systems is an award-winning developer of add-on solutions to enhance Sage 300. They actually have many products in addition to Orchid EFT. They're based in Sydney, Australia, and they've been in business since 1993. Over 5,000 companies worldwide using Sage rely on Orchid products, and the average site is actually running 2 or more Orchid modules. All of their solutions are developed with the Sage 300 SDK, which means that learning the product is easy because it has the same look and feel as your Sage 300 software, and it also runs in the same database and therefore is part of things like the database dump and load and data integrity. The next subject, how does Orchid EFT work at a very high level? Today we're going to focus on the AP processing side of Orchid, but it can handle receipts, and it also handles payroll EFT. So let's focus on the AP side today. So vendor invoices and payment processing is really the same as it is now. You create your payment batch as you do now. You post your payment batch, and then you create your EFT file in the format required by your bank. Then you use whatever method the bank requires you to submit the EFT file that is created. So typically you would upload that to your online banking, or if they allow it, Orchid EFT can send a file via SFTP. That's really a high level of how it works. Let's talk a little bit about what's the effort and the process for implementing Orchid EFT. So the first step would be to do some preparation work with the bank. We need to get the EFT file requirements from the bank. Next, we need to test to be sure that the file created matches an existing file format in Orchid EFT. If it doesn't, we can edit the file format and test again until the bank tells us that it is in the right file format. The third bank preparation is to determine the process with the bank to submit the EFT file. Next, we need to prepare with our vendors. So we need to get information and permission from each vendor to pay by EFT, including the bank name, the account holder name, the bank routing, and account number. Many times that's a letter just encouraging your vendors to accept this new method of being paid so they get paid faster, and then have them submit a voided check to you. The next thing we need to do is install the software and activate it. Very simple. Then we go into configuration, and I'm going to show you that in a demo here in just a moment. Then we'll give you a little training and go live. So let's go into a demo. Let's look at the setup first of all. What's required for that configuration that we talked about? In the EFT processing setup, we're going to go into options. And we're going to focus, as I mentioned today, on just the AP, but you can see that you can use it for AR as well as for payroll. These 4 settings here, these first 4 choices, define the way that you can create an EFT batch. The first one is asking you if you want to be allowed to create a EFT file based on a batch range as opposed to a single batch. We typically do the single batch for better audit trail. The second one is, do you want to be allowed to create an EFT file off of unposted batches? Again, here we typically suggest no, because an unposted payment can change. The next one is asking if in this batch that I've defined, I have a vendor that is not set up as an EFT vendor. How do you want the system to behave? Do you want it to skip the vendor and continue the export, or display an error and abort the export? Typically, we recommend that you display an error and abort the export, but this requires that you keep a separate payment batch for just EFT payments as opposed to a mixed batch with check printing and EFT batches. One thing I want to mention is that only employees with a business need should have access to protected information like your vendor's bank routing and account numbers. So through standard Sage security for your Orchid EFT module, you can make your security settings such that only the appropriate people can see the full account and routing number, and your other people can only see an encrypted, like the last 4 digits of your account number. The next thing on this EFT option screen is the primary bank account. This determines the format for your EFT file. So we're going to find out from the bank what format we should use. You can see here that there are hundreds of bank formats that exist. And which one I choose is going to make a difference as to what fields show up on your EFT bank and also on the vendor's EFT setup. The next thing we do is set up the details for your email server so that we can email remittance advices to your vendors when an EFT file is created. We can also control what the actual report looks like. So we can select the crystal report we want to use to send to our vendors, and we can modify the existing one, or we can create our own. Next, we'll come back over here to our setup, and we'll go to banks. You can configure any one of the Sage Common Services banks for EFT processing. So you may have multiple banks and only one bank you're going to do EFT processing out of, or you can actually have it come out of created for multiple bank accounts. When you choose let's go into one. When you choose the EFT file type here, these fields on this screen will change because different file formats require different pieces of information. Your bank will be able to tell us which one of these, again, hundreds, we should use. There are standards. So for example, there's a notch standard in the US. So this one, we can see that we have some for Citibank, Bank of America, etc. So if there are unique requirements that are required for your bank, we'll be able to, if we don't have that format here, we'll certainly be able to modify the format so that it will accommodate your bank needs. The next we want to do is actually set up our vendors. So we have vendors here. Here we also have in our accounts payable vendor menu, we have the EFT vendors here. Same screen, 2 places to get to it. I'm going to come back here just because we're going to continue in the setup. So all of your vendors will display. As you get the information from your vendors, you can populate this screen with all the necessary information to create an EFT payment for them. The fields that are displayed on this screen are based on that EFT bank type that we selected. The delivery method here is how you want the remittance advice to go to them. So if you select this AP vendor delivery method, then it's going to go look at your AP vendor. If you choose the delivery method of EFT vendor email, then it opens up this field and you can put in the email address that you want the remittance advice emailed to. and it's separate from your regular AP vendor email. So here we have the rest of the information, who the vendor's bank name is, the routing number, the account name, and any other fields that are required by your bank. In order to make the data entry easier, you can do a file import just as you can in any other Sage 300 module. You can turn the status to active when you're ready to go live with EFT. The next thing we're going to look at is your email message. So this would be the message that is used when you email your remittance advice to your vendor for an EFT payment that has been made. You have a description of your email message, and then this is the subject line that would be used for your email. And then you can see you just have the narrative that would be used. These particular fields where you see $, if you do your function F1, go into your help for Orchid EFT, you will get a list of all of these fields, and then it will populate your email with the appropriate information so that this is really personal and, you know, can report the dollar amount and the date and all that information to your vendor in the cover letter of the email. Remembering that we're going to be attaching to this email the remittance advice that we saw under the option field, under the options here on the default advice. This is what's going to be attached to your email. So let's now talk a little bit about the actual creation of your EFT file. What is the process? So as we mentioned, you're going to go through your normal payment process. Many people create a payment batch. One thing that you can do if you want to segregate your payment batches, so you have one payment batch that is just all EFT vendors, is create a selection code for EFT vendors. If you do that, then you might want to have a group, a vendor group called EFT, and as you get vendors opting into your EFT payment method, then you put them in the vendor group EFT and you create the selection code EFT. So you go through the normal process of creating your payment batch, and of course, sometimes people just create their own EFT batch in the AP batch list, just create a new one and put vendors in it. At any rate, the normal process really for creating a payment batch, and then typically you would post it. Now, I'm going to work with this batch number 61 right here, and I am not going to post it. I left my options to be allowed to generate an EFT batch on an unposted one. As I mentioned earlier, typically we wouldn't do that just because an unposted batch can change, but for demonstration purposes, I am allowing that. So we've got our payment batch, we've got it posted, and we're going to come down to EFT processing here under EFT transactions, and we're going to create the EFT file. So the batch type is an AP payment batch, and here you can see, because in my options I said I'm not going to allow a batch range, so I'm just going to use batch 61. So I can see all my batches here, and I'm going to pick batch 61. Then I pick my file type, which again is that EFT file type that the bank is going to tell us. So it will dictate the format of the file that is created. I can put in the description here. I can have my reference field in that file that is created be any one of these choices. And again, it's bringing in my choice from my EFT options as to what I want to do if that vendor is not defined as an EFT vendor. So I'm going to say create here. It's warning me that I've already done this one, so I tested batch 61 before, so I'm going to go ahead and say yes. But this is a good thing because this prevents us from sending a file to a bank twice. So you know you've already exported it. It's asking you if you want to overwrite it. So I'm going to say yes, and it tells me that it exported that file. And here's the path of where it exported that file. That file that was created, so here's the path. So see Orchid EFT files, and this is the one that I just did, and I'm going to open it. Now this file format would likely look a little different than yours. This is a Canadian file format, looks a little different, but I just wanted to show you. Okay, so now we've got this file on our C drive and we need to get it to the bank, and we're going to do that by either logging into our banking online portal or by sending it via an FTP. There are several reports under EFT reports. The first one is the print advices. So this is where you would go to actually email your advices to the vendors. So you've uploaded the file, you know it was successful, you know they're going to get paid from that EFT transmission to your bank. The first thing here is a delivery method. So if I say print destination, my print destination is preview here, and I am going to show you this just so that you can. I'm going to change this to batch 61, the batch that I did, and then you can see that this is going to print that EFT remittance advice that is going to be attached to an email I'm going to send. So this is just letting me look at it, and of course I could send it. But if I want to email it, then I'm going to tell the delivery method is for the vendor, and I'm dealing here with my AP batch, and here's where I get to select what that attached report is going to look like. Here's where I can use a message in my email. And then if I click print here, it's going to email that to my vendor. Notice this checkbox if you want to send an email, even if it's already been sent. So this is going to prevent you from accidentally sending it twice. You actually have to check this box if you want to resend it to a vendor. For the emailing, you can pick a batch range and you can pick specific entries. So when I say print here, this actually is now emailing it to my vendor. There are other reports here that are important to note. There is the transfer details and the audit log. In addition to having actual reports, I'm going to show you, if I go back to, periodic processing, then I can see some details of each of the batches that I created. So just to show you one that has multiple transactions in it. This is the one we just did, so I can double click on it and show you, and it's just that one. I want to show you what one looks like if there are multiple payments. So typically you're probably going to have an EFT file with more than one payment in it, and this is how it shows you everything that was in that batch. Tells you all of the details of it, the address, all this information about the EFT vendor. In addition to this, there's an audit log. So this audit log will tell you every change to every EFT vendor that ever happened. So it's very good because you want security over this. So that's the demonstration. Orchid EFT is a very strong product, but I do want to distinguish it from AP automation, which is becoming very popular. AP automation typically covers the entire AP invoice cycle, from receiving the invoices from your vendors through approval and payment. It will eliminate the keying of invoices and offer you an approval workflow and allow document attachment. There's a couple of AP automation products that interface very nicely with Sage 300. We have a couple of clients using Avid Exchange. On the payment side, the process is similar, except you only have one payment method, Avid. And when you process payments, it creates a file to upload to Avid, not your bank, and they then do the payment processing. I hope that was helpful. If you have any questions, please contact us at dquest.com or send us an email at info@dquest.com. Thank you.
Great. Debbie, thank you for that. So I've contacted a couple of folks, everyone should see a chat from me, so if you have a question, you can put that in through the chat. I did get a couple of questions, Debbie, during the webinar, so I'm just going to go ahead and fire away.
Okay.
So the first question I got is whether international payments will be processed differently.
Well, it's definitely, Orchid is definitely an international product. And I think the answer to that, or a couple of questions back at that would be, are we talking about multi-currency? So that will we have a separate bank format requirement? But in general, I can answer that question by saying it can definitely be handled by Orchid EFT.
Okay, great, thanks. A couple other questions that came in on the chat. Will we have to set up new vendors? I'm asking because one of our companies pays all vendors EFT. Is there a way to import or tap into the current vendors?
It is based on your current vendor. You do not set up a new vendor. You add additional information to the existing vendor, and that really is just what I was showing there, the routing number and bank account and the bank name. So no, you don't, but that information also can be imported. Like if it's easier for you to build it in a spreadsheet and then import it, that would be fine, but it's not a different vendor. It's the same vendor that you're using now.
Okay, great. Just got to thank you through that. Okay, another question is, what's the difference between ACH and EFT?
So ACH is really one type of an EFT transactions. EFTs can also be debit payments and wire transfers and electronic bill payments. Anything that moves money from one account to another is a global EFT, and ACH is the specific type of it. But there's really no difference between the two. EFT simply covers a broader variety of transactions. Both are processed through the ACH network. Okay.
Okay, this is a bundled question. These are two different questions I'm combining. One is, how quickly can we get Orchid EFT implemented, and what's the cost of the system? Is it an installation and monthly, or how does that all work?
Typically, how fast is really just a couple weeks. That assumes that we can get that file format from your bank and get their cooperation in testing it right away. But it's quite simple to set up and get going. I mean, you saw everything that was involved. So a couple weeks. You know, if you're thinking about it in advance, get connected with your bank to get that information. And the second part of the question was, how much does it cost? Orchid you can either outright purchase the software, or more typically nowadays is you pay an annual subscription for the product. So you either outright purchase it and pay a maintenance fee every year, or you subscribe to it and pay an annual subscription fee. As far as the implementation, what we will do, if you're interested in implementing this product, we'll follow up with you and sort of get the scope of exactly what we need to do, you know, how many banks and how the file format and that kind of information, and then we'll fix price the implementation for you. Okay. So I hope that answered that.
Yeah, sure. And I'll also say we're about at our time. But yes, I got a question, will we have access to this recorded webinar after we're done? Yes, you absolutely will. We'll be sending out sort of a wrap up once the recording is finalized. This will be part of our blog, and we'll be sending out an email to let everyone know that that's available. And we'll also be following up with everyone on this call so we can talk about your interests and next steps. I just got a couple more questions. Let me just pop these in. Debbie, how would we know if vendors will accept this before we move forward with implementing it?
Well, you can always call them. Do they accept ACH payments? Very few vendors would refuse that. There's no reason. They get their money quicker. It's easier for them. They don't have to go to the bank. I suppose there's some very small ones that might not, but call them, ask them.
Okay, good.
Tell them the advantages, they get paid faster.
Right.
No mail, no lost mail.
Right. So if you've got any other questions, please just contact Debbie or myself. We're really happy to help, but you'll definitely expect a call from us shortly to follow up. And I just wanted to say thanks everyone for being part of the webinar, and we're going to wrap up now.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks all. Bye-bye.